My name is Murat Özbaş. I am the president of Maryland Turkish American Inhabitants, MARTA. Welcome to our dialogue dinner. We do these dinners, we like to say we do it annually, but we do it once in Rockville and once in Baltimore with our sister organization, Rumi Forum. So after the dinner, we will begin our program. So for now, I'm gonna talk about our organization. Established in December of 2003, MARTA is a nonprofit and non-governmental organization supported by local people of Maryland. We have 3 community centers that are located in Rockville, Hagerstown, and our headquarters in Baltimore. We serve the entire local community by promoting intercultural dialogue, friendship, and understanding through educational and cultural activities. Some of these activities include annual dialogue and friendship dinners, legislative receptions, intercultural study trips, social gatherings, luncheons, picnics, seminars, and art and craft exhibitions. Any contribution to the peace, prosperity, and harmony is greatly appreciated within our organization. We believe that we can build stronger bridges within our community if we get to know one another. It is why we are dedicated to reaching out to our community, as well as to serve societal peace and friendship between local communities by striving to spread values such as cross-cultural understanding, respect, and dialogue. To this end, MARTA works in collaboration with local cultural, religious, and civic organizations in Maryland, hoping to build a better society. Moreover, MARTA is made up of volunteers, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists who are inspired by a movement called the Hizmet movement, where the word Hizmet in Turkish means service. Inspired by a scholar named Mr. Fethullah Gulen, millions of people around the world gather locally and act collectively to institute schools, dialogue centers, and social service organizations. And last but not least, on behalf of our organization, I would like to express our condolences for the families and loved ones of the Boston Marathon victims. We strongly condemn the attacks and hope that those who are responsible are brought to justice. Once again, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening. Enjoy the dinner, and our program will continue after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Murad. Good evening to all of you. It is a joy to be back with my friends at MARTA. It's an absolute delight and a privilege to speak to them tonight, and also to speak to other friends. I had the opportunity to be with you in November up in Baltimore, and they invited a Baptist preacher to speak to a room full of very diverse people, and I did it, and they've invited me back again. So I'm not sure if it's my sanity or theirs you should question, but very honored and humbled to be able to speak to their other friends here in Rockville tonight to talk with you about several things, but the core of what I'll speak about is a trip that we just took to Turkey. Again, it's kind of a strange place to find an evangelical Christian, an interfaith dinner. We typically aren't the sort to be found at events like this. If you're kind of wondering, well, evangelical, I've heard that word. Baptist, I've sort of heard that word. Where's that in relation to Presbyterians and Episcopalians and others? Well, we're sort of way out here we're sort of the wild, wild west of the Protestant world, basically. That's kind of where we come from, and we love people. We believe God loves all people. We're excited about sharing the message of Jesus Christ with other people. We have some very strong beliefs, and so for that reason, this is kind of new ground for a lot of evangelical Christians to be in a room like this, and in a sense, it reflects the times in which we live. And so I'm standing here tonight, and you may even be wondering yourself, what on earth could be accomplished out of someone in my role coming to an event like this, and two groups of people with very different and very exclusive faiths, let's just be honest, coming together. How can you do that? How can you get along? Because again, here I stand. I represent 61 churches located in the Baltimore, Washington area. And they're of different stripes, different ethnicities. They speak different languages. 8 different languages every Sunday morning are used in order to worship God in our churches. But we hold some things in common, and a number of those are things where there are going to be some significant differences on. And so when we first met our friends, we talked about this, not because we wanted to be offensive, but we wanted to be honest, and we wanted to be upfront, and we wanted to truly honor one another by being who we were and allowing them to be who they were. And so the result of that is you have a guy standing in front of you here tonight kind of kicking this thing off, who believes that Jesus is God, who believes that he bore the wrath of God for our sin, who believes that he's the ultimate way that God has shown his love for the entire world, including everybody in this room. And we're working now alongside people who, many of whom just don't believe that. And as such, we have very different views of God, very different views of sin and redemption, very different views of heaven and hell, and yet here we are, living together in this part of human history at this time, learning about each other, building friendships with each other, working together to try to build a better world, and when we're able, doing it together, and continuing to talk about how we can do that. And on a personal level, I've discovered some deep friendships also. Murat introduced me, and I will tell you of him that I've come to see him not just as a valued colleague and someone that I've worked together well with, but as a very dear friend and a man with whom I would trust my life and my family's life. That's how much I think of this man and those who are his associates. And so I'm honored to be able to speak to you tonight. I think that all of that speaks well of our Turkish friends and their high capacity for developing these sorts of unlikely relationships. They've really modeled for me what it means for two people of very different faiths to walk together, and I'm grateful for their example and their friendship. Very grateful for the fact that they took me and 6 of our pastors to Turkey with them a few months ago, hosted us for 9 days there, and because of their hospitality, we were able to witness firsthand some of the good that's happening as a result of this group of people and what they're doing on both sides of the pond, so to speak. We saw things happening in that part of the world that I've never read about in the Baltimore Sun, never seen on CNN, never seen it. And I know that it takes bad news to sell headlines, increase Nielsen ratings. But if you get a chance to go, you should go, because you'll see things you don't read about in the paper or see on television, and you'll come away, I think, with the impression that I came away with, which is such a great contrast between what you often see on television and what you actually experience among those who live in what we call the Muslim world. Among the great things we witnessed were Gulen-inspired institutions of higher learning. Konya was one of the more memorable places for me. It was the home of the 13th century philosopher Rumi. And we visited Mevlana University there, where students from all over the world come to study education, law, medicine, engineering, and business. And then we went to Sanliurfa, the place of Abraham. We stood as Muslims and Christians together at Haran, the place where we believe Abraham received his call. At the same time, less than 30 miles from some of the violence that was recently occurring over the border with Syria. But we spent the entire day there, our pastors, in a place where Muslims and Jews and Kurds and Turkish and Christians have lived together in relative peace for over 1,000 years. It was a very memorable moment for us. One young pharmacist, in fact, named Ramazan, I continually talk about him to our network of pastors. He lives in this area, and he said to me, I want to take what we've done in this city and I want to spread it throughout the Middle East. I want my city to be the starting gate for peace. And when you meet somebody like that, you really can't help but admire them and love their heart and aspire for a world where all of us share that kind of a heart. In Istanbul, our pastors were introduced to an organization called Kimse Yokmu. Now, this is a nonprofit disaster relief organization. Since its inception in 2002, has brought help and relief to more than 60 countries. And while in that city, we were also introduced to the good people at the Journalists and Writers Foundation. That's an organization that provides 6 very distinct platforms for dialogue and promotion of peace among the adherents to the world's religions. And of course, one of the most impressive things you'll learn when you go to Turkey is about their food. One very great distinctive about Baptists is we take that really seriously, food. And so I'll tell you, theirs was absolutely exquisite. I've never tasted better lamb anywhere else in the world. Ever since I've come back, I've been on this hopeless search for this thing called Mirage. If you're not sure what that is, it's a form of ice cream that's left me completely unsatisfied with Breyer's Pet, you name it. I'm dissatisfied with it now. I can't find it at my grocer. Still looking for the Mirage. And so we enjoyed the food, but we also enjoyed the fellowship and the camaraderie that comes whenever you share a meal with somebody. I mean, that really is, isn't it, the point of enjoying a meal with someone, to get to know a little bit more about them. My primary role is, as the director of a multi-church organization, is to be a mobilizer of those churches for intercultural work, both in the Baltimore, Washington region and around the world. And so one of the benefits of my job is I get the privilege of being in the presence of people from nearly every nation, tongue, and tribe. And I can tell you, based on those experiences, that when it comes to hospitality, my Turkish friends in the room here, they can't be matched. We just had an incredible time together. They gave us an incredible gift by hosting us in their home country, and an experience that I think changed all of us, regardless of our faith, and changed us for the better. And so as I reflect on what we've learned, there's a few lessons I want to share with you that I shared with the folks in Baltimore, and one other one that I asked Murat's permission to be okay if I amend what I said in Baltimore a little bit to just reflect some of the things that we have, that would reflect the progression of our relationship together. So we saw, first of all, the power of cross-generational effort in Turkey. When you look at this thing that's called the Gulen movement, you see what on the surface looks like a young man's movement, and yet what we saw were sometimes 3 or 4 generations of individuals working together. I think that's healthy. Some of our churches could learn from that. I'm sure some of you have faith communities that might be able to learn from that, because you have a ministry for your children, a ministry for your youth, and a ministry for your young adults, your married, your single, your older adults. But faith families really should be a family, and what we saw in Turkey was the power of that sort of cross-generational effort. Second thing we saw was a group of people who speak very quickly, as Murat did tonight, and very boldly to the violent elements of those who claim their faith. And in doing so, they're really teaching, I think, all of us, regardless of our faith, to speak against the violent tendencies within our own spheres of influence. Our group landed in Istanbul in September, less than a week after the attacks on the U.S. Embassy in Benghazi. And our friends were very quick to condemn that attack. We've discussed this and other issues since, and I can tell you they genuinely deplore violence that's committed in the name of their faith, and it's that strong opposition that's actually encouraged this Christian, this follower of Jesus, to examine the violent tendencies that sometimes can rise up and regrettably be committed in the name of Jesus. And here's what I learned from that. When most of the world thinks of Islam, what do they think? When we in the West look at it in the media, we look at this faith, and we see an image like, for example, masked men shooting a young girl for no more than wanting an education. Or if we look at more recent events like the bombing in Boston 2 weeks ago, and we later learn that the perpetrators were tied to radical organizations, and the temptation is almost immediately to see that violence as inherent in the faith itself. And here's the problem with that. When you look at that picture and simply declare and assume that is Islam, you forget, and I do too if I make that assumption, that people, extremists of every sort and kind, often appeal to their faith of origin as a source of authority. It's hard to argue with somebody when they say, God told me, right? I mean, that sort of stops the dialogue. It sort of stops the conversation. I'm a native Southerner. I know this from experience. I grew up in South Carolina. If you go back far enough in my family tree, you will find individuals who intimidated minorities in the weak. They did it while they were wearing a white mask and with a burning cross in the background, and they did it under the mantra of Christian. And I'm very thankful that no one generations later looks at that picture and says, well, all Christians are that way. We have to be careful. And the best way to understand what we believe and learn each other is to simply talk to each other and be at the kinds of events that our friends are hosting for us tonight. I'm grateful to be in agreement with my friends who believe that neither of our religions should be defined by the cowards among us who would commit such atrocity, nor should we tolerate those within our own ranks who do harm to anyone, regardless of their faith, their background, or where they come from. They're human beings We believe they're created in the image and likeness of God, and violence is unacceptable. Now, the third thing we learned is this: the dialogue that we had with them, I think, represents the very kind of public square discourse that is needed so sorely in North America. And I'll explain what I mean by that. We're Americans, and so we live in a context of religious liberty, and I'm thankful for that. And as such, we rightly resist what evangelical social critic Osgood S. calls a sacred square. And by a sacred square, I mean a nation where our social standards and our body of law are based on one specific religion. You simply cannot maintain peacefully a sacred square in a pluralistic and a democratic society. But while we're wise to resist what more progressive pundits call theocracy, neither can we really have what Gulen calls a naked square, which I think may be part of our mistake here in the United States. Somehow, I think we've developed this mentality that because of religious freedom and because of the right to believe what you want, that somehow religious conviction isn't just personal, but it's private, and therefore it shouldn't be an appropriate subject of national conversation. It has no place. Don't mix religion with fill in the blank, right? That's a very American value that probably has harmed us more so than it's done us good. And from a personal perspective, I can tell you that, because faith really touches the very deepest and most meaningful part of who we are as human beings. I can tell you, based on the fact that my personal relationship with Jesus Christ isn't just something I do on Sundays. It defines the totality of who I am. And so if I can't talk to you about my faith, you're never really going to get to know me. And as I've spoken with my Muslim friends, I've learned the same thing about them. If they can't talk to me openly and freely about their faith, I'm never really going to get to know them. We've got to learn to get to know each other at the most deep and meaningful level, which means we have to learn to talk about faith. And our Turkish friends can teach us how to do that. They can do it. I experienced people quick to speak of their faith in God, quick to listen to us as well. Again, they took 7 Baptist preachers with them. What did they think we were going to talk about, right? I mean, they knew this was coming. And they were very open, they're very honest, very respectful, and so were we. And we left those conversations in deeper friendship than when we entered those conversations. And I think if we do those kinds of things with respect for the image of God that's stamped on all of us, and if we talk about our difference and urge each other, not out of some sort of competitive spirit of comparative religion, but out of concern for each other, I think that makes for a very healthy, strong relationship of the sort that we badly need in our own country. And after our visit to Turkey, I'm convinced that our friends here are highly qualified by their own experience to teach us how to have precisely that kind of conversation. Now, the one thing that has happened since that trip is we continue to walk together and talk together, but we're also beginning to try to work together, to do some things together. They invited us to Istanbul. We have tried to, not as a way of paying back, but as a way of respecting their hospitality and offering it back to them, asking them to join us on a trip to Dallas. Now, I know what you're thinking. Istanbul and Dallas are not on the same level, and you're exactly right. They're not. But the reason we're going to Dallas is my friend Bob Roberts has something called the Global Faith Forum that he's holding at Northwood Church in Keller, which is a suburb of Fort Worth. There will be Christians, Jews, Muslims, people from all faiths and no faith who will be there. There'll be leaders global from all over the globe that will be there. And we're going to be talking about how it is that people with very deep faith, even faiths that differ very much from each other, can work together and kind of join together in those common beliefs. And so we're going to continue that conversation. Muslims and Christians believe in a strong moral fiber as a necessity for the continued existence of any civilization. And so our respective networks, my association, Marte, and other organizations as well have already worked together. For example, we joined up with the Araminta group just a month ago. And the result of that was we were able to ensure that legislation would be passed in Maryland that would more readily equip law enforcement and our courts to more effectively combat human trafficking, which is becoming a huge problem in the U.S. and particularly here in the corridor. And so our common belief that human beings are created in God's image leads us to work together for the betterment of all people. And that's a conversation and some action that I look forward to as a follower of Jesus. We learned a lot while we were abroad with our new friends, and we look forward to learning more as we continue to walk together. We look forward to engaging with them in matters of common interest, building that genuine friendship that I've been talking about that demonstrates our common humanity in powerful ways. And so if you're invited by them to go to their country, clear your calendar and go. It is completely worth it, and you should be prepared to have your life and your perception of what happens in that part of the world changed, and changed in powerful ways. I just want to thank my friends at Marte for inviting this guy a second time to come and share those observations. I hope that I have served you well by my being here. Thank you for the food and the fellowship. It's been a great evening. Thank you all.